Good morning, friends and enemies. This morning I got up bright and early and I ripped off a handful of fantasy football mock drafts for the 2025 season. I'm going to share those boards and talk through them with you today. Now, we've got a mixture of mock drafts. However, I was picking from pretty much the same spot in all of them. So if you have a middle of the round draft pick, this video is for you. In two of the drafts, I was picking from the 107. And the third of the three drafts that we'll be going through today, I picked from the 108. Now, this is broken up into Superflex, 2 quarterback, and 1 quarterback. We did 2 Superflex drafts, one quarterback draft. I'll be doing some general player outlook analysis throughout the video either way, so I think regardless of what league type you're in, it'll be valuable to you. But if you just want to skip to your actual league type, all the timestamps will be linked down below. So let's jump into the boards. And I know a lot of you guys have been commenting what happened to tucking your shirts in before the video starts. I didn't forget. I'm so locked in this summer that I just come pre-tucked. So this is the first of the 3 drafts. This is the 1 quarterback league. As you can see, no quarterbacks going off in the first round. And I was picking from the 107. I'll highlight my team for a sec if you want to digest it quickly, but we do want to open up the board a bit. Start off with Malik Neighbors at the 107. Ashton Genty dropped to me at the 2-6. Trey McBride at the 3-7. Then I went with the triple stack of receivers. Devontae Adams at 4-6. Devontae Smith at 5-7. Travis Hunter 6-6. Grabbed my RB2 at the 7-7 with Brian Robinstein Jr., Josh Downs, Ricky P., Rashad White, Brock Purdy, Dylan Sampson, and another Cleveland Brown, Cedric Tillman. Never feels good to go back-to-back Cleveland Browns, but that is the squad. And let me take you through my thinking. The format for this league, it is full PPR. You start 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, 1 QB, 1 tight end, 2 flexes. So we have, 4 bench spots there, down there at the bottom. Now, it feels to me in drafts this year, if you're in the middle rounds, you're either right inside that tier of the top 6 guys or you're right outside the tier of top 6 guys. So when I look at most drafts, what I've seen so far is you're seeing Chase, Bijan, Saquon, Jefferson, CD, and Jahmyr Gibbs go with the first 6 picks in some order or another. Sometimes Gibbs is the 6, sometimes Saquon is the 6, sometimes it's Bijan, sometimes it's Jefferson, whatever. But those 6 guys are typically where you're seeing the first 6 picks invested into. And then you get to the 107 where I was, and it's kind of this mixture of some people might take C-Mac all the way up at the 107. He drops to the 2-4 here. For me, I'm typically looking at one of the top wide receivers at the 107, whatever floats your boat, whatever sinks your submarine. Malik, Puka, Nico, BTJ, have really no problem with any of those guys. One of the issues I do have starting with a running back here is if you do that, by the time it comes back to you at the 2-6 or the 2-5, a lot of the times that tier of wide receivers is gone where you do still get some sort of leftover running back there that is an RB1. So I typically lean with the receiver. And what you'll see in a lot of 1 quarterback leagues, and I think this will end up being a popular sentiment by the end of the summer, is like the end of the round, I think is where you want to be. If you get to pick your draft spot this year, somewhere from the 1-9 to the 112 is beautiful. You're able to get a high-end running back. You're able to get your choice of one of the second-tier wide receivers here. I typically like to double tap the receivers, at the corner there, something like a Nico, Brian Thomas Jr. I love the BTJ, Devon Achane stack. I love the Amon-Ra, Drake London stack. Like, those are the guys that I love to start the drafts off with. Obviously, I think I got a little lucky here with Genty falling to the 2-6. So I was able to start with Malik Neighbors as my wide receiver 1, who I think has a real chance to be one of the top fantasy wide receivers this year. But again, I wouldn't get too hung up on the exact players and more so like the sentiment of what I'm saying here. Would have been happy with Puka there. Honestly, would have been happy with Nico Collins there. Would have been happy with any of those receivers. Genty falling to me at the 2-6 was a beautiful sight to see. I got my high-end RB1 that I think captures a lot less risk than the guys going after him. Like Jacobs is, a great running back 1. You do question if they go a little bit less run heavy. You do question if Marshawn Lloyd gets more involved in the offense this year. He was a day 2 pick, just dealt with injuries all last year. Jacobs doesn't have the pass catching upside that a guy like Genty does. Same thing with Jonathan Taylor in a possibly bad offense in Indy. So those guys have question marks that I don't think I have with Ashton Genty. So I was happy to get him there. If I missed on Genty, let's say Genty went at the 2-5 instead of Josh Allen, I likely would have tapped A.J. Brown there and then started off with like a really heavy wide receiver build, which I would have been happy to do in a PPR league. I'm not the highest on A.J. Brown, but I do think there's a chance that Jalen Hurts throws the ball a lot more given the schedule is going to be a bit tougher. And, people are really, really in on the narrative of Saquon not being able to handle a workload in back-to-back seasons. Say whatever you want there. AJ Brown and Malik Neighbors would have been a dynamite start. But I do love like the wide receiver and the wide receiver one, running back one start, because it kind of gives you an avenue to go like hero in either direction. I can go, and tap another running back after this and still feel good about my receiver position because of the depth overall in drafts this year. Or I could just go wide receiver heavy, which I ended up doing, and been fine with whoever my RB2 is. It's pretty easy to fill an RB2 slot in fantasy football, especially in PPR leagues, because if you think about the guys that are typically like impact players off the waiver wire throughout the year, it's very clear cut for running backs. Like a guy gets injured, which we saw like very, 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 very lucky injury health last year, where like most of the top guys stayed healthy throughout the entirety of the year, which is never going to happen 2 years in a row, right? Like we did see McCaffrey have injuries, but everyone is able to scoop up his backup, and then that was pretty much it for the entirety of the year. You look at all the top other guys, like for the most part, they stayed healthy. This year won't be the case there, which I think is more of a reason to kind of fade the RB2 position, because when a top-end wide receiver gets hurt, there's not a clear path to like who's a guy that's going to be replacing his production. It's typically a platoon environment. It's not like a handcuff environment for wide receivers, which is why I think it's easier to replace the RB2 or RB3 slot on a PPR league, because clear cut what you're getting from the waiver wire for the most part. At the 3-7, I went Trey McBride, and I haven't been experimenting too much with early tight end builds, but in a PPR league, I love the value of Trey McBride here, and I don't feel super great about any of the other options on the board. Like JSN would have been cool as a wide receiver too. Garrett Wilson's a pretty good PPR option, but like I don't love Wilson. I don't love Higgins in the mid-third round. Breece Hall, James Cook, I think all come with their own inherent risks. So I was happy to get a top 3 tight end there in full PPR. So now we give ourselves a lot of flexibility to work around what we're doing going forward, because we don't need to force any specific position, because we've kind of got all bases covered here. I will say, like you're seeing Josh Allen go at the 2-5 here. You see Lamar at the 3-3. You see Jaden Daniels at the 3-5. I think that's going to be a very common, draft position spot for these top end quarterbacks. Like if you want Allen, you want Lamar, you're going to have to use a back end second, early third on them. I would have been happy to grab Allen or Lamar if either of them fell to me at the 3-7. I would prefer one of those two over a Trey McBride, over a JSN, over a Garrett Wilson or T. Higgins. Just didn't work out that way. At the 4-6, I thought Davante Adams was just such an easy pick here for me as my wide receiver 2. He'll likely be the wide receiver 2 in targets for LA this year, but I mean, him and McVay, and I'm just not much to explain there. Was happy to get Davante Adams there. I also think I got Devontae Smith at the 5-7. I get it, like people are a little bit low in this Eagles passing offense, myself included, but we have the same conversations every single year, every single offseason about like the same 10 dudes, like the Devontae Smiths, the DJ Moores, the DK Metcalfs, the Cortland Suttons, the Jalen Waddles, the T. Higgins especially is a great example of this. It's kind of the same fucking 10 to 12 dudes that finish as the high-end wide receiver 2s to the low-end wide receiver 2s. And Chris Olave's down there. And it's the same guys that pretty much recycle depending on what they did in this most recent season is how we draft them going forward. Like last year, if you remember, Devontae Smith and Chris Olave were like picks 2-3 to the 2-7 to the 2-8. And then they had a little bit of down years. And like T. Higgins was the guy that was almost an afterthought in that group of guys. But T. Higgins just had the big year. Devontae Smith and Chris Olave just had the bad years. And then they just dropped. So it's kind of this revolving door of all of these guys putting up similar production, but we're just drafting the one who had a little bit of a better season last year. So I'm going to buy the dip. I'm going to buy the 2-round discount on T. Higgins down to Devontae Smith. And listen, I'm not an idiot. Like obviously the passing volume in Cincinnati is going to be extremely high relative to Philly. But at the end of the day, I guarantee you their production, if T. Higgins doesn't have a spike of 12 touchdowns, their yardage and reception numbers are going to be eerily similar, obviously pending health for everybody. But that's the way I'm looking at a lot of these wide receiver 2s. We just play this game of whack-a-mole trying to guess who's going to be the best of them. And the only thing we go off is exactly what happened last year. So Devontae Smith, I'm happy to have as my wide receiver 3. I've gotten very little of Travis Hunter because he's normally like a 4th or 5th round pick, but him dropping to the 6-6, I was happy to get in a PPR league. I think Liam Cohen, one of the easiest layups that he's going to be able to implement into this offense that he saw major success with in Tampa Bay, and they so rarely utilized in Jacksonville, is the screen game and just line of scrimmage game where like BTJ, Travis Hunter, those types of guys will have so much success doing. We saw it with Chris Godwin last year. We saw it with the running backs and Bucky Irving and Rashad White, and that's something Liam Cohen's going to bring over to Jacksonville that I'm excited about. So in a PPR league, I really like Travis Hunter here at the 6-6, and you're seeing just a massive drop-off in quarterback production for fantasy here, where like Mahomes goes at the 6-12. That's almost 3 rounds after the most previous drafted quarterback in Jalen Hurts, which I'm fine to keep letting drop because as you could see later on, I grabbed Brock Purdy at the end of the 11th round, which I like Bo Nix a lot, but I don't feel super confident that Bo Nix is going to have this like massively better year than Brock Purdy in fantasy. There's no reason a 4 to 5 round difference should be the case here when they're probably going to score within 1 to 2 fantasy points per game of each other. At the 7-7, I ended up taking Brian Robinson. I was praying to the Lords that Caleb Johnson fell to me there as my RB2, but he didn't. And I'm fine taking Brian Robinson. He's not a high upside player. But again, I've tweeted out about this pretty frequently recently. So if you're not following me there, you can go check it out. The thing with Brian Robinson is like, listen, every year we have these guys who have massive spikes in their touchdown totals simply because they're in the right place at the right time and they're in really good offenses. You could just see this list of guys. It's Gus Edwards in 2023, 13 touchdowns. Jamal Williams in 2022, 17 touchdowns. Damian Harris in 2021, 15. LeGarrette Blount in 2018, 18 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert in 2023, 21 touchdowns. James Cook last year, 18 touchdowns. I don't think James Cook really belongs in that league because he's probably not a one-hit wonder. But all of these offenses were top 7 in scoring that year. None of those guys are this blow away elite type of talent. So like, of course, in the preseason, you're like, Brian Robinson's not that great. You weren't looking at any of these guys as phenomenal options. They just happen to be the early down goal line back in what's projected to be a very high scoring offense. Jaden Daniels and Washington were the number 5 scoring offense in the NFL last year, and Brian Robinson's going to be the goal line back there. So of course, Brian Robinson could end up just kind of being irrelevant, seeing 11 carries for 52 yards a week, catching 2 passes for 7 yards and scoring a touchdown every 2 to 3 games and being kind of irrelevant for you. But he could also, again, just back his way into 9, 10, 12 rushing touchdowns. Same thing with like a guy like Pacheco, but I was able to get him almost 2 rounds later just because they're in the right place at the right time. They don't need to be this insanely high-level talent. And here's the thing. If you fade running back 2 and you land on the Mostert of that year and you land on the Jamal Williams of that year and you land on whoever of that year, there's a really good chance you have the best team in fantasy football. So those are the shots I'm trying to take. And then after that, I'm just going for like high upside wide receiver talent. In leagues where you're playing full PPR, you're only starting 2 running backs compared to 3 wide receivers, and you have multiple flex spots where you can pepper wide receivers in those areas. I am stacking a shit ton of wide receivers and some, borderline RB2, 3, 4s on my bench. And then I'll just nail the waiver wire throughout the year as people are getting hurt and running backs are getting hurt, and that's where you can really replenish a lot of the running back depth on your roster. So you'll see I go Josh Downs, I think one of the most mispriced ADPs in fantasy football right now. I went Ricky Pearsall at the 9-7. I know he technically started on the pup, but he's going to be in training camp within the next couple days. Rashad White at the 10-6. I think he's kind of being left for dead, although he's still going to have a very I think volume-heavy passing part of that offense in Tampa Bay. Brock Purdy is my QB1. Dylan Sampson's a guy you will see. I believe I took him in every single mock draft that I'm going to show you today. And then Cedric Tillman at the 13-7 with my last pick here. He was a production hoe when Jameis Winston was under center last year, and then he got hurt, and then Jerry Jeudy kind of took over as the one there. So I like Tillman as a late-round stab as well. But I absolutely love how this team was built out. Let me move myself over a little bit so you can see how the bottom rights of the mock draft went. You see a little tight end run there, whatever. But this is the final roster. You could see on the right here. You got Brock Purdy at quarterback. You got Genty and Brian Robinson as your running backs. Malik, Devontae Adams, Devontae Smith as your receivers. Trey McBride as a tight end. And then you're just choosing different flexes between Hunter, Downs, Ricky Pearsall, Rashad White, hoping one of those young receivers breaks out, just kind of scouring the waiver wire for a running back. If Quinshon Judkins is suspended for 6 to 8 weeks, I legit think Dylan Sampson will be a playable fantasy asset off the rip as a flex play. So that was mock draft number 1. That went on way longer than I expected. I didn't think I was going to dive so much into strategy here, but let's move over to the Superflex leagues. And I will say before I move on, I put together a pretty awesome little PDF of my top 100 rankings. It's like a cheat sheet with my top 100 rankings. It will be updated in the beginning of each month, and it's got players that I really like tagged as must draft, great values, complete fades, sleepers, whatever. Anyone inside the top 100 of my rankings that I feel like should be labeled as such. The way you get this, it's completely free to get if you download the Pick'It app, which is basically like a social sports betting tracker app. It's really, really cool. You can go see everything that I've taken so far this summer. So if you go download the Pick'It app, which will be the first link down below in the description, and you use code BDGE when you get on there for the first time, this is for first-time downloaders, all you got to do is sync one book that you play on, whether it's Underdog or BetMGM or Prize Picks or DraftKings, whatever. Any book that you've ever signed up to, go sync one of them to Pick'It, and it'll track everything that you do. And again, you can go follow me. I'll link my profile down below. But download Pick'It, free to do, code BDGE, sync a sportsbook. The cheat sheet will be sent out to you within about 10 to 15 minutes of syncing one of your books, and you'll get an updated PDF sent to you at the beginning-ish of each month, August, September, for as long as you're drafting. And if you're really into tracking what you're doing throughout the summer, they also have a Pick'It Pro plan available for you. That's not free, but it comes with a ton of really cool value props if you are in the actual betting space. All right, so let's move over to draft number 2. Again, picking from the 107. This is a Superflex 2-quarterback league. So picking from the 107 again, I was really happy that Burrow fell to me here. I think if I'm picking within the first, 6, 7 picks, I really want one of those top 5 quarterbacks. And you see there's a huge drop off after Josh Allen, Lamar, Jaden Daniels, Hurts, Burrow. And, typically I'd say, people are quarterback hungry when they're playing in Superflex or 2-quarterback leagues. I do think we're going to see a similar type of draft fall like this with quarterbacks. So just keep that in mind when you're drafting. Let's say Joe Burrow went at the 1-5 and I ended up taking Justin Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb at the 1-7 here. I genuinely don't think you need to feel pressure about getting your QB1 here in the second round. I think you could be fine stacking either your RB1 or your wide receiver 2 after going non-quarterback in round 1 because of where the value falls. Like I've done a bunch of mocks and Superflex specifically. You're able to, in round 4, 5, 6, stack, a Kyler, Brock Purdy, a Caleb Williams, Dak Prescott, a CJ Stroud, Jared Goff, a Justin Fields, Jordan Love type beat. So I would say if you don't get an elite guy, that's fine. But the other way to look at it, and I will pretty much mention this with every Superflex video I do, my strategy in Superflex, I know a lot of you guys are probably new to this 2-quarterback Superflex. The way I would draft is if you make a list of all the quarterbacks in fantasy football and you rank them, and then you basically put a line at where the last guy you would be comfortable starting in a 1-quarterback league. You put a line underneath that, and you just want to draft 2 quarterbacks above that. So if you did your rankings and CJ Stroud ended up being like your quarterback 19, but you would feel good about, or you feel fine about starting him in a 1-quarterback league, that means you want to draft 2 quarterbacks in your Superflex league that are the quarterback 19 and better for both of your spots. It could be the quarterback 19 and the quarterback 12. It could be the quarterback 1 and the quarterback 9. You just want 2 that fall in there in order for you to have a sound strategy when it comes to Superflex quarterbacks. That's the way I would look at it. And then other than that, you kind of just draft normally. At the 2-6, Brian Thomas Jr. fell to me there. Was ecstatic about that. I took Trey McBride again at the 3-7. Similar makeup here. I would say if I redid things, I might have taken Josh Jacobs there at the 3-7. He went here at the 3-9, got my RB1 instead of Chase Brown, though I really like Chase Brown, and the value at 4-6 I feel like was phenomenal there, so I'm not upset about it. But I was just saying, if I did things differently, I think there's a world where I go Josh Jacobs there and then maybe George Kittle in 4-6, or go with a wide receiver 2 in round 4, though I don't love the value there because like Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, whatever, they're all off the board. I'm not a huge fan of Tyreek Hill this year if you guys have been following me, so that necessarily wouldn't have been a target of mine. But just something to think about if you do want to fade tight ends. But I've actually really been liking the builds I've been having with going Trey McBride in the middle to late 3rd round here. Got Chase Brown as my running back 1. Again, got Devontae Adams as my wide receiver 2. You'll notice the ADP is just a little bit different because obviously, 10 or so quarterbacks are picked before that, so it pushes him down a full round. was pretty hyped to get him as my wide receiver 2 underneath BTJ. So through 5 rounds, we have our QB1, we have our wide receiver 1 and 2, we have our RB1, we have our tight end. Like, we don't have a lot of holes in the lineup. And then Kamara falling to 6'6" is insane value. People just do not want the veteran running backs. Like, you'll see Kamara at 6'6", James Conner at 6'10", Joe Mixon at 7'6". Like, they just don't respect the old regime, man. Respect the class of 27 stain. We got to round 7, and I was feeling a little bit of pressure to go with my QB2 here. I wanted Trevor Lawrence, who went off at 7'4", but I also felt that I was okay with any combination of Matt Stafford or Tua or Geno Smith or J.J. McCarthy as my QB2. So I was like, you know what? I'll risk it a little bit and hope that one of those guys falls back to me at the 8-6. So I was able to get George Pickens at the 7-7. I really have no problem if you wanted to go with like Jalen Waddle there or Calvin Ridley. But I don't have a lot of shares of George Pickens, so I figured I'd go that way. McCarthy was the next pick, and then I grabbed Matthew Stafford as my quarterback 2 at the 8-6. And being able to get Brown and Kamara makes me feel phenomenal because I don't have to force another like running back 2 or 3 pick for a minute. So I just kind of kept stacking up wide receivers that I feel really good about in PPR. We grabbed Khalil Shakir, and then I had a queue of like, I didn't want I like Darnell Mooney, but like I prefer these other guys way more, and I basically had all these dudes in a queue, and then they all ripped off consecutively. Jacoby Myers, Emeka Egbuka, Ricky P, Josh Downs, Stephon Diggs, Juwan Jennings, all of whom I would have preferred to Darnell, but just didn't work out. Ended up grabbing Darnell Mooney here. And then I took, my first kind of like bench upside running back in Cam Scatabo. And then A-Rich, man. I'll be honest, man. I think A-Rich is probably going to be a top target of mine in Superflex leagues as my QB3. Obviously, in the games that he starts, he's going to be ranked as a quarterback 1. How many games he starts? Up to anybody. We did hear good news that Richardson was actually back on the field for training camp. He missed a lot of time at OTAs and like voluntary like mini camp and all that kind of stuff while Daniel Jones took all the snaps with the starter. But Anthony Richardson, if he's there for the entire summer, I still think he could win that quarterback job. At the end of the day, I think they both for sure end up making starts throughout the year because neither of them are good enough to really hold the job probably. But yeah, give me Anthony Richardson in the 12th round as my backup quarterback with crazy upside. And then I took 2 more running backs. Najee Harris down in the 13th round feels a little bit crazy. I get the whole firework thing happened, but like, I don't know. They seem fine about it. Like he's going to they fucking signed Nyheim Hines. And people are losing their minds as if there's any fucking correlation between Nyheim Hines and Najee Harris. I don't know if you can name 2 more opposite players at the running back position. Nyheim Hines hasn't played football in 2 years. You are a fucking moron if you think Nyheim Hines has something to do with Najee Harris, okay? That's top 5 most ridiculous things I've ever heard. And then we obviously ended with Mr. Dylan Sam Stain. So that was draft number 2, and then we'll jump into draft number 3 here. Another Superflex league. I'm picking from the 8 spot. This time we did miss out on our QB1, and I actually went with a running back first. So I went with Bijan at the 108, wrapped around with Nico Collins at the 2.5, which I was hyped about, but again, would have been fine with BTJ or Amon-Ra St. Brown or even Drake London there to start building the team. And like I said, I didn't necessarily feel pressure to draft Mahomes or whoever at the 2.5 here because I knew the value still was hitting there in the 3rd to 5th round. So I was able to get Brock Purdy at the 3.8, was able to get Garrett Wilson at the 4.5 as my wide receiver 2, and then Kyler Murray at the 5.8. But there's still guys that I really like after Kyler Murray. Like Jared Goff at the 6.10 is great. Stroud I'm fine with. Jordan Love down there at the 7.10. So even though I went running back wide receiver in a Superflex league, I did not feel the pressure to like go crazy in the 2nd round for a quarterback or stack them 3rd and 4th round together. The team still ended up fine. I was able to get Chuba as my running back 2 behind Bijan in the 6th round. Just another example of people fading these veteran running backs in favor of the rookie running back. Trayvon Henderson went 5'5", RJ Harvey 6'9", Caleb Johnson 6'12". I want to get a piece of this class, obviously, but I'm not going to force it over guys that I know are proven beasts in their backfield. And then we ripped off a bunch of receivers. Absolutely fucking love the receiver values in round 7 through 10. So we went Xavier Worthy 7'8", who should have a really big start to the year if Rashee Rice's suspension is as big as I'm hearing it's going to be. Could be 4 games. I'm hearing it's possible that it's up to 6 or 8 games. But if there's one thing that I've learned throughout my time covering fantasy football, it is that anytime the fantasy community feels like they know anything about a suspension length, a contract dispute, or legal matters, I can guarantee you they have no fucking clue. All right. So don't draft as if you know what's going to happen. You could spread your chips around. If you want to decide on a spectrum that you're like, I'm just going to kind of bake in 4 games for Rashee Rice, draft off that. But don't draft based off some bullshit you hear on Twitter, because the fantasy community, with those 3 things in particular, are always fucking wrong. Like, literally, I don't know if they've ever been right about it. So let's go Worthy. We went Waddle in the 8th. We went Jawan Jennings in the 9th. And then again, we grabbed Brian Robinson Jr., this time in the 10th round as our RB3. Anthony Richardson again as our QB3. Then we had Isaiah Likely in the 12th. I faded tight end accidentally. Like, this one actually kind of got off the rails. I remember this draft. If Tucker Kraft fell to me at 10-5, I would have taken him there. I probably should have just taken Ingram or Ferguson or Loveland, but I think I was heavily in the chat on this mock draft, and I kind of missed out on the tight end position. But this is an example of fading tight end, and I ended up double tapping Likely and Brenton Strange. Not a great duo there. Ramondre, I think, is kind of being left for dead, even though I don't think he should be. Ramondre Stevenson is a guy right now that I actually think is probably going to enter the year as a starter. Josh McDaniels has, as an offensive coordinator, always really had one dude that has operated as the bigger back that gets most of the early down work and a lot of the goal line work. So I think Trayvon Henderson will be a weapon to begin with and kind of work his way into a bigger role. But for right now, I do think Ramondre is probably a pretty good value, especially if we're expecting the Patriots to take up as big of a jump as Vegas really is. So here's the final roster for that one. Really, I am a big fan of how all 3 of these teams turned out at the end of the day. You let me know how bad this was. I literally can't do a mock draft video without everybody telling me that these are the worst teams I've ever seen drafted in the history of the game of fantasy football. Y'all are the best. Y'all are just such nice people. It's crazy. Yeah, so these are the squadrons. We'll see a lot of overlap. We have Devontae Adams on 2 separate teams. We have Trey McBride on 2 separate teams. We have Brian Robinson Jr. on 2 teams. We have Brock Purdy on 2 teams. We have Anthony Richardson on both Superflex leagues. And then we have Dylan Sampson on 2 teams as well. I probably just wasn't paying attention. Oh, no, he did go off on that one. All right, so there you have it. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was useful. I kind of fell off the mock draft train a little bit, so I was hoping I can pepper y'all with 3 at the same time. And I know this was a different style or speed of mock drafts you guys are probably used to on YouTube. It wasn't live. I just did a bunch of mock drafts this morning and then kind of wanted to show you some of the teams afterwards, show you what I was thinking, show you the strategy I was kind of approaching them with, and, having a little bit more time to just talk through them thoroughly with you guys. All right. So if you did enjoy the video, again, the way that I know which videos you guys like the most is when you hit the thumbs up button. I have, I could see that on the back end, which ones you guys hit the thumbs up button on the most. So if you did enjoy the video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and that link to download the Pickett app. Use code BDGE. It's free to do. All right. Just sync one of your sports books, and 10 minutes later, they will send you over the top 100 cheat sheet. Okay. I love y'all, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Smoochies.